Greetings, fam. This is Dark Horse Assassin, Rise of the Messiah, Chapter 9. November 21st, 2005. 3 years later, Langley, Virginia. At his father's prodding 40 years ago, Gerald Bush went to work for J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI as a senior field agent, a position that usually took at least 10 years to earn. All of his life, Gerald was pushed to the front, and almost every promotion and accolade he'd received was because of his father. Senator Bradley Bush was a big brash bull that wielded his political power like a sword, cutting down anyone that stood in his path. Gerald's father was known by friend and foe as the Bull. Bull was short for bulldozer, although most thought bully was a better moniker for the overbearing, huge man that always seemed to have a cigar in his mouth or between his fingers. Now, Gerald was the complete opposite of his father. He'd avoided hard work like the plague his entire life. While bullying wasn't Gerald's way, finding ways to manipulate others to bend to his will was. He'd never been in a physical fight, nor had he ever actually shot someone. His rise in the CIA was partly due to his father's unique way of collecting on favors that he was owed. But it was mostly in part due to his success after recruiting Treble XR-13 Frazier. It was in the FBI that Gerald met Treble Frazier. Then, the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, in the 60s, did not like anyone who interfered with his FBI, as he put it. Gerald's father had done just that. As head of FRAC, the Federal Resources Appropriations Committee, the senator had threatened to cut the FBI fiscal budget in half unless Gerald was promoted to senior field agent. Although Dr. King had just been declared an enemy of the government, Gerald's father had become an enemy of Hoover, which trumped an enemy of the state or the government. That's why, with less than a week's notice and absolutely no field experience, 38 years ago, back in 1967, Gerald's first assignment as senior field agent was to appropriate a sniper and take out Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. before he publicly took a stand on the Vietnam War at the huge multi-ethnic interdenominational Riverside Church in Upper Manhattan. Hoover often equivocated his success to others' failures, and Gerald's monumental impending failure would force Hoover's hand to rescind Gerald's promotion. The day had been sunny and cloudless. It was a mild 60 degrees on this New York early spring day. The wind and visual conditions were almost perfect, Gerald thought as he watched people from all races, creeds, and colors file into the church. The people had been dressed in their finest clothes. It was as if they were expecting royalty. Although Gerald was on the 8th floor of an abandoned building, 1 city block away from the church, he had a great view of the front entrance where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was due to enter before he arrived. Hoover's orders had been to make sure King never made it into the church. The sniper Gerald appropriated was said to be one of their best. Gerald was somewhat nervous, being that this was his first time being a spotter on a real hit. Only been a spotter in training exercises at the academy. Gerald was actually more nervous at failing his father than failing to manage a kill shot. The high-powered one-eyed scope and the cool, clear day helped to alleviate some of the young agent's trepidation. A bright light momentarily blinded Gerald when Dr. King's entourage pulled in front of the colossal interdenominational church. It was the light of another spotted scope. That was another sniper. Gerald could have had his guy take out the sniper, but he had figured that the other sniper was a friendly sent by Hoover to make sure that there were no screw-ups. If everything went as planned, Gerald knew that if he got King, then he would be the future king of the FBI. Hoover was too eccentric and even more controlling than his own father. After measuring the breeze, Gerald gave the sniper the coordinates. King stepped out of the vehicle. Gerald gave the order as the sniper squeezed the trigger. Gerald and his sniper were lost for words. Their mouths dropped open. If they had not seen it for themselves, they would not have believed it. Shooting like this was unheard of. It was impossible, well, almost impossible, to purposely do what they had just witnessed. Two bullets colliding in midair 100 yards away from Dr. King. Gerald immediately saw this as an opportunity instead of a failure. Gerald promised the sniper $50,000, the same amount the government was giving the hired killer and after King was assassinated. In return, the sniper would collect the shell casings from the street below and blame his failure on a rifle malfunction. Gerald trained his high-powered scope on where the other sniper fired the shot. Soon he spotted a young, tall, medium-built, dark-skinned, professionally dressed black male leaving the Chemical Bank building on the opposite end of the church with a suitcase just large enough to carry a broken-down sniper's rifle. The man moved with absolutely no urgency. This gave Gerald time to get in position to follow him. Gerald did just that, all the way from New York City to Ebenezer Baptist Church, located in the well-to-do Auburn Avenue area in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. Gerald had always followed orders and had never strayed, but this time was different. He just couldn't bear to face his father in light of the seemingly recent failure. He could care less about Hoover and the Bureau. Now was his chance to redeem himself, and he would not let protocol stand in the way. On that first day of the surveillance, Gerald saw Treble shaking hands with an older, distinguished-looking black gentleman wearing a white clergy collar outside of Dr. King's home church. Gerald immediately knew that the pastor was a man of means. Even affluent blacks did not drive convertible Mercedes-Benzes in the 60s. After running the plates on the pastor's Euro 220e Mercedes, he found out that Dr. John Boyce was a famed archaeologist who specialized in sub-Saharan artifacts and African religions. Bush was also surprised to learn that Dr. Boyce had earned a PhD from Morehouse in theology and was even occasionally called to preach at Dr. King's Ebenezer Baptist Church, as well as other black churches around the nation. Over the next week, Treble was seen coming to the lavish estate home of Dr. John Boyce. It was really odd that Treble was never seen leaving. After a week of discovering nothing about Treble Frazier, Gerald decided to move in and arrest him. Since the Bureau had not sanctioned the arrest, Gerald had to use the basement in a foreclosed Metro Atlanta home for the interrogation. After 2 days of nothing, the interrogation ended with an opportunity for Treble. Gerald had confirmed that Treble was a former Army Ranger, one of the first African Americans to be accepted into the rigorous military unit. He couldn't believe that racism had prevented the American government from recruiting him as a federal agent. Treble Frazier's skills set scores were the highest ever recorded. Marksmanship, archery, hand-to-hand combat, strategic planning. No one could come close to his skill set. After studying Treble's dossier, Gerald was even more in awe of the man he saw split a bullet from over 300 yards away. Even under interrogation, torture, and the threat of death, Treble hadn't acted like a man taking his last few breaths. Calm and stoic, Treble had fluidly and articulately answered all of Gerald's questions, some even honestly. Afraid of killing the man that he intended on recruiting, Gerald ended the week-long interrogation and torture. As long as Gerald could convince Treble to work for and with him, then how he knew about the King assassination plot was irrelevant, and he told Treble as much and agreed to cover it up as long as Treble acquiesced. Seeing that he didn't have much of a chance to see another tomorrow, Treble had accepted Gerald's offer to join him once he obtained a position in the CIA. After botching the hit on King and going AWOL the week after, Gerald knew he would have too much of a hard way to go at the Bureau with Hoover at the helm. The CIA was going through a restructuring phase because of the way the agency had mishandled the situation on the Indochina Peninsula, the situation that had led to the Vietnam War. Hoover would see it as the ultimate revenge for the senator's intervention on Gerald's behalf. Gerald just had to make it seem like it was Hoover's idea to have him transferred to the FBI's troubled stepbrother agency. Once there, Gerald would use his father's resources and Treble to help turn the agency around. Orphaned at 3, Treble had been raised on a farm in Gary, Indiana by a distant relative, a widow named Hattie Mae Frazier. Gerald had learned that Treble joined the Army straight out of high school. Hattie Mae seemed to be a church lady. Her and Treble had very few friends. It was just the two of them living on a 40-acre farm raising livestock and vegetables. So what was the connection between a Midwestern farm boy and a world-renowned archaeologist and popular theologian? What part did the Reverend Dr. John Boyce play in the life of Treble Lee Frazier? Gerald planned to get answers soon to those and so many other questions. Soon would consist of 2 things. 1, Gerald establishing himself as a power player in the CIA, and secondly, a visit to Dr. Boyce, one where Gerald would get the answers he wanted. In exchange, he would either allow the archaeologist to remain among the living, or he would make Dr. Boyce's death instant. Today, November 21st, 2005. Gerald and the agency had known about the bomb shelter and the underground tunnel a couple weeks after XR-13's house exploded. It had taken almost 2 years before probate issues were resolved, before the land was put back on the market. To the best of the agency's knowledge, no one knew about the elaborate bomb shelter and the quarter-mile tunnel that led to a public sewer. As instructed, the city had informed the FBI, who had in turn informed the CIA when an offer came in on the land. The land had only been listed a few hours when the Focus Holdings offer came over the facts. It was a full-price offer at $250,000, $100,000 more than the land was worth. Gerald had known that if someone offered anywhere near the asking price, that they were probably linked to Treble XR-13 Frazier. Upon further investigation and a lot of shell company digging, Gerald found what he was searching for. Greenway Financial owned Focus Holdings, the name on the offer. Greenway Financial was owned by Quality Essential Imports. Beatrice Foods owned Quality Essential Imports, and TLC owned Beatrice Foods, and TLC was owned by the Reginald Lewis Foundation, and the chair and CEO of the Reginald Lewis Foundation was none other than Dr. John Boyce. The winner, or shall I say the loser, is the esteemed Reverend Dr. John Boyce. Sir, are you all right? Gerald's secretary asked as she cracked the office door and stepped in. He looked up from the computer with a mild, wide smile on his face. Fine, Judy. I am supercalifragilisticexpialidocious fine. Okay then, she smiled. I will just close your door and leave you to spinning around in your chair. Gerald thought back to something his dad used to say. "Junior, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good." It wasn't all luck, he surmised. He had followed Treble back in '67. He was the only one that knew that a connection between Treble and Dr. Boyce existed. Despite not being able to explain away the DNA lab results that confirmed XR13's demise, the director never truly believed that XR13 was dead. Covering up his own death would be child's play to someone as accomplished as XR13. And now, all he had to do was send a team in to sit on Dr. Boyce. Gerald wouldn't risk planting bugs. If XR13 were still alive, he'd detect the bugs. Or he could have taught Dr. Boyce how. Nah, he'd wait. He'd waited almost 40 years to interrogate the retired archaeologist and church leader. A little while longer would not hurt.